Howdy, folks, and welcome to another adventure. And today we are back on this book here, the Star Library, continuing along with our adventure in the Rocky Mountains. And if you don't remember, this guy went out west in the Rocky Mountains and he is documenting his trip. He went out there to explore and take notes and write this book, telling of his adventures. Now, these adventures he could have got killed on. Nothing like taking a vacation that you could die on. Plus the hardships, frostbite, attacks, snake bites, bears, Indians, you name it. This trip was taken in the 1840s. So we're going to join our fellow compatriot as he adventures on, picking up where we left off last time, and we're on chapter 15. And as always, I am going to share with you some great stuff. And we're going to pick up where we left off somewhere here. And we'll start, shrink that. And then we're going to shrink this and put this up and start out somewhere here. And who doesn't like this good stuff? Pictures are worth 1,000 words. So we'll continue on with that. But I'm glad you're all joining me tonight. And if you're liking this, give me a thumbs up and share it or watch it later or whatever you want to do. But, I hope you're enjoying this. And you don't want to hear me sit here and babble. So we're going to get on with the show. Of course, I need to present you with something so you don't have to look at my ugly mug. There we go. And we're going to do, this. This looks good. Anyway, there we go. Chapter 15. And I have my light. Okay, previously to leaving this place, considerable discussion arose relative to our future course. The proposition was to continue up the Sweetwater Valley to the dividing ridge and head of Green River and return on the same route, versus the suggestion to cross the Sweetwater and proceed up the Platte to the confluence of a large tributary from the south, hence keeping by the valley of the latter stream as far as Medicine Bow Mountains, return to the fort by way of the Laramie River. The fast melting of the snow and anticipated difficulties, not to say the dangers and consequences, upon high water in the passage of creeks and rivers, influenced us to adopt the latter as the most advisable course. Such was the final decision, and the men and me, being familiarly acquainted with every nook and corner of the adjacent country, I improved the opportunity to edict from them all possible information relative to the Oregon route from this onward, and never having personally traveled from Independence Rock to the head of the Green River, it may not be out of place to lay before the reader a succinct statement of some of the items thus gleaned. The distance from this point to the famous South Pass is but little over 100 miles. The trail follows the Sweetwater to its source, keeping the river valley the most for the distance. The valley consists of an undulating prairie, at all intervals rough, varying in width from the narrow limits of the few yards to the more ample dimensions of 4 or 5 miles. Sometimes the adjoining hills close in upon the river banks and force the trail among their rugged windings. In one place, the road leads over a high stretch of table, and for nearly a day's travel, when it again descends into the valley. The streams in places is tolerably when timbered with cottonwood or oak and aspen, and rolls over the rocky bed with a clear and swift current. The distance through the pass is about 15 miles, and the ascent and the descent also so gradual that the traveler would scarcely notice the transition from the head of the Sweetwater to that of the Colorado. The hills at this point are low and the face of the country rolling, but not rough, affording at all times the most excellent wagon road. On the morning of the fourth day, we accordingly retracted our course, and having traversed a rugged and hilly country from some 10 or 12 miles, we camped in a small open prairie at the mouth of the Sweetwater. During our ride, we noticed several large bands of wild sheep and intervals gazing upon us from huge masses of granite that towered with isolated summits to the frequent latitude of 60 or 100 feet. The next morning, we crossed the Sweetwater a little above its mouth. The ford was quite feasible, and the stream, being some 10 yards wide and 3 or 4 feet deep, was a bed of sand and pebbles. From this point, traveling up the Platte for about 10 miles or more, we arrived on the opposite and the creek previously alluded to, and crossing at a shoal place a short distance above, camped in a grove of cottonwoods and willows at the delta formed by the confluence of the two streams. There was several bottoms of rich soil in this vicinity, but black from the river, and the country is rough and hilly. Westward, the Sweetwater Mountains, distant some 10 miles, showed their craggy peaks, and to the north, the east, the piney crest of the Black Hills burst upon the sight, while southward, a succession of high, rolling prairies opened to the view of a variety of romantic and beautiful scenery. Wow, sounds like a beautiful place. Okay. We remain, let's see, change the picture. We remained at this place the 2 following days for the purpose of hunting. Game of all kinds appeared in great abundance, particularly elk. At several points among the willows near the river were noticed fresh signs of beaver, and among the hills, the recent marks of bear in digging for roots. A large bird called the mountain fowl, quite common in these parts, was an occasion of some little curiosity, being the first of its species I had ever saw. The bird is rather large than for a domestic hen, and of a grayish brown color. Little accustomed to this presence of man, it easily falls a prey to the hunter. Its flesh is tender and most excellent in flavor. Having attained a fresh supply of meat, we resumed our course, continuing up the right bank of the creek, which I had named Medicine Bow for a lack of a better term, and traveling by easy stages for successive days, we arrived at its head, a distance of more than 50 miles above its junction with the Platte. Many beautiful bottoms skirted the banks of the stream, which were well timbered with cottonwood, aspen, birch, willow, box elder, and some few pines. The soil is generally of a reddish loam, and luxuriant size of the dead grass, together with the rank verdure of the present season, gave evidence of its richness and fescue. I was pleased to observe not a few wildflowers of rare beauty in full bloom, lending to their fragrance the breath of spring, and blushing at the admiration challenged by their loveliness. On the right lay a broad expanse of undulating prairie, covered with stately clusters of ad, ansalooth, and disclosing every variety of soil from the rude sterility of an African desert to the rich productiveness of a garden. On the left of the mountains, increasing in altitude, jutted their craggy sides in close proximity to the creek, now disclosing immense piles of granite, red argillous, grayish, micaceous, dark ferruginous, and white carliceous sandstone, limestone, and coarse grained conglomerates, naked and variegated with almost every diversity of color, and now surmounted by stunted pines and cedars of towering blossom, hemlock, and pinyon, and in front of the lofty peaks of Medicine Bow reared their snowy heads, beyond the clouds opposed to the eternal barrier to further prospect. Wow. Ain't that a cool description? As we passed along, I noticed 3 or 4 small branches that emptied into a creek from the opposite side, and just before reaching our present encampment, we crossed three others from the right, all of them well timbered and graced in rich valleys and parallelians. The section of country being the great war ground between the Sioux and the Cheyennes on the one side, and the Snakes and the Crows on the other, is considered dangerous, particularly from May till November of each year. During that time, it is extremely unsafe for a white man to venture within its confines unless protected by a strong force. A small creek at our right became the scene of a bloody tragedy 2 months subsequent to our visit. 3 trappers, with whom I became acquainted upon my return to the fort, tempted by the abundance of fur-bearing game common to this vicinity, came here with the purpose of making a summer hunt, while successfully pursuing their occupation, unsuspicious of immediate danger. Well, I guess that's what you get for being a trapper, huh? Not having suspected of any danger. They were suddenly surrounded early one morning by a war party of Sioux, whose first salute was a discharge of firearms, accompanied by a shower of arrows and sharp thunder of defeating yells, or deafening yells, I should say. 2 of them fell dead. The remaining one retreated to a hollow tree, close at hand, into which he crawled, and though severely wounded, maintained from an obstinate resistance till near sundown, keeping at bay the whole host of savages, assailants, and thinning their numbers one by one with the deadly discharge of his unerring rifle. 6 warriors lay stiffened in death, as many more had felt the burning smart of wounds, one of the latter having had his tongue shot out close to its roots, and still he continued an unequal contest. His triumph would have been complete had not the remorseless crew, as a last resort, set fire to the woods and burned him from the shell-like fortress from which he could not drive, or they could not drive him. He fell with his companions, mingling his own blood with that of their murderers, and the scalps of the 3 were treasured among the horrid trophies of the savage victory. Well, he put up a good fight. One of these unfortunate men was named Wheeler. Oh, and he was from he was a Pennsylvanian. Another named Cross Eagle was a Swede, and the third name not remembered was a native of France. They were men of noble hearts and much esteemed by all those who knew them. In the neighborhood, I noticed many indications of coal, of which there appeared to be extensive beds, as well as iron, mineral salts, and such and so forth. Continuing on, our short ride brought us to a pass trail, following which, after traveling a few miles by a road intercepted by frequent ravines between the defile of mountains, we were finally ushered into the broad prairie, opening eastward, known as the Plains of Laramie. The mountains upon both sides were heavily coated with snow, which intruded into the trail, while groves of pine and aspen relieved the eye in scanning their rough escarpments. The prevailing rock appeared to be compact red granite with occasional straits of sandstone. Must have been beautiful to see. While winding among the ravines and the aspen groves, we obtained an distinctive view of the strange-looking, dark-colored animal that my companions pronounced as a carcogudue. One of these characters, or even existence of such a creature, I cannot speak of positive knowledge of this if one not being sufficiently near for a scrutiation observation, and no other of its kind ever came in my way. But in answer to inquiries, I am able to give the following description, for the correctness of which, however, I will not vouch, though for my own part inclined to accredit it. The carcajou is a native of the Rocky Mountains and is a family of species found in no other part of the world as yet known. He seems a distinctive genius, partaking in a mixture or mixed nature of the wolf and the bear, but is far more ferocious than either. His color is jet black hair, long and coarse, and the body trim and slender. His head and neck are like those of a wolf, but his tail and feet assimilate that of a bear, and his body presents a marked qualities appearance of both. I wonder what that thing is. In size, he is considerably larger than the common cur dog and is more agile on his movements. Unlike the bear, he will not run from the presence of or the scent of a man, and regards the Lord of creation with neither fear nor favor. Hence, he is looked upon as a creature much to be dreaded by all who are anywise consistent with his character and existence. The repetitiveness of his family are seldom met with, which affords the principal reason why so little comparatively is known of his nature and habits. If the information contained above is a description is correct, and it is so, I have not the least doubt that the carcajou presents either the extraordinary phenomenon of the creation of a new race of wild beasts, or the living relics of an now old, almost extinct, or whether he be the one or the other. His existence is vested in deep interest to all lovers of the marvels of the world. An old trapper related the following story soon after the incident above, notice which will serve to give some idea of this ferocious animal. A party of hunters at their night camp were seated around a large fire, at whose side were fixed several pieces of meat, and apparatus for the purpose of the roasting. All were waiting patiently the kind office of the fire in preparation of their longed-for suppers, when, attracted by the fumes of the cooking vidalias, a carcajou came bounding from the mountainside directly over their heads and made for the roast, with which he disappeared. Before even a shot could be fired in their defense, the bold and daring of their nature, and so little is in their regard for the presence of man. Bearing southward, in the course of a few miles, we came to a large creek, camped early in the afternoon near the base of the lofty mountains of the Medicine Bow Range. In this vicinity were the relics of 3 Indian forts. On the banks of the stream was an abundance of timber of various kinds, and bottoms were broad, of a rich soil, shut in by abrupt alkalies that led to the arid plains through which the creek traces its way. Game appeared in great abundance in all directions, and seemed more than usually tame and accessible. Soon after camping, 3 of us went on a quest for some fresh supply of edibles, and towards night returned with the choice portions of a buffalo and a black-tailed deer. The valley afforded large quantities of wild onions, which were shooting forth with singular luxuriance. We passed the night in quiet slumber, neither of us dreaming of possible existence of humans, beings other than ourselves within a less distance than 100 miles. In the morning, however, we were awakened by the wild yells of savages, and looking to ascertain the cause, saw a dense throng of painted monsters surrounding us, who were whooping, screeching, and dancing in a most terrific and fantastic manner. Seizing our guns, we leveled at the foremost of them, who immediately adhered their bows and made the sign of friendship and their nation. Lucky for them, somebody was going to get shot. That's what I'm thinking. They were the Crows, and having discovered us the afternoon before, now came for the morning call. The chief of the band bore the name of Little Robber, and was a large, portly, well-made man, as in fact were all his party. He was recognized by one of us as an old acquaintance, and was greeted with such several of his people came forward to shake hands, and we were soon on most friendly terms. They informed us by means of signs that they were advancing against the Sioux, and their village was encamped upon a neighboring creek a little to the right, which they insisted upon our accompanying them to it. Not waiting for further ceremony, they drove up our horses and commenced saddling them. Supposing it useless to resist, we yielded compliance to their wishes, and within about an hour's ride, came to their village. Here we were introduced to the chief's lodge, where we commenced a series of feastings, particularly to the Indians on occasions like this. The Crows are a nation living upon the waters of the Yellowstone, at a distance about 400 miles northwest of Fort Platte. Their number embraces not far from 450 to 500 lodges. That's lodges, not people, lodges. Being something near 4,000 men, women, and children. 10 to 12 years since they were enemies to the whites, but more recently have been on friendly terms. They never kill or injure the white man who comes within their power, and rarely take from him anything without returning it in an equivalent. For instance, they may take his robe, horse, and gun, but in that case, they will return another robe, horse, or gun, acting upon a principle that exchange is no robbery, even though it is compulsory. Less contaminated by intercourse with the whites than most mountain tribes, they will tolerate the incorporation of liquor among them upon no consideration, not even by traders, for their own individual use. Whoever it is certain that any one of their vicinity, whether white man or Indian, is in possession of that article, they take it from him, if necessary by force, and pour it upon the ground. Their bitter hatred of this vile stuff is said to have resulted in following strange manner. The whites, as usual, came first among them, with them bringing alcohol, and at a feast given to the chiefs soon after, several of their latter became intoxicated from too lavish portions of the new curious drink. In common with celebrations of civilized societies, they acted very foolishly, and on appearing before their people, the drunken chiefs became subject to ridicule. This so shamed them that upon the return of sobriety, they should not be persuaded to taste another drop, and thereafter made use of their united influence to prevent its induction into and sale. Ever since the above occurrence, alcohol has been received from the Crows and the application of fool's water, a term at once arrested their nice moral discernment and for good sense. Several years since a missionary, on visiting them, began through an interpreter to rehearse a show or a story how sin first came into the world, and how all men had become bad, whether white or red. Thus, first seemed he introduced to explain the great truths of Christianity. Ooh. And averted that he had come to them good and to tell them how to be happy, asserting that unless they listened to him and worshiped the good spirit in the manner he pointed out, they could never at death reach the happy country into which the good people alone find admittance. One of the chiefs upon this arose and made a following reply: My white brother is a stranger to us. He talks bad of us, and he talks bad of his own people. He does this because he is ignorant. He thinks my people, like his, are wicked. Thus far, he is wrong. Who were they that killed the very good man of whom tells us? None of them were red men. The red man will die for good men. No, the red man will die for good men who are his friends. He will not kill them. Let my pale faced brother talk to the white man. His own people, they are very bad. He says he would do good, he says he would do us good. He does no good to chide us and say we are very bad. True, we are bad, and were we bad as pale faces, it would become us to listen to him. Would my brother do us good? Then let him tell us how to make powder, and we will believe in the sincerity of his profession. But let him not believe us by saying that we are bad like the pale faces. He's got a point there. He's got a really good point. Smart man he is. These Indians rarely kill the women and children of their enemy when in their power, and in the particular, they show themselves unlike most of the wild tribes found in the American continent. They are brave and noble people, persecuting their endless hostilities against the Sioux and the Blackfeet, the only nations with whom they are at variance. not so much to gratify and initiate love for war as from a just hatred and meaningless of those they war against. In the summer of 1842, a war party of some 200 Crows invaded the Sioux country by the way of the Laramie Pass and penetrated as far as Fort Platte and beyond in pursuit of their enemy. A few miles above the fort, having met with a lone French engaged who was rather green in all that pertains to Indian, as well as some other things. They began by signs to inquire of him the whereabouts of the Lake Lakotas, the sign for them being the transverse pass of the right front fingers across the throat. The poor Frenchman, mistaking this for the avowed intention of cutting his throat, commenced bellowing a la calf, accompanying the music by an industrious appliance of crosses in double quick time, not forgetting to make use of the sturdy, most earnest invocations of the Blessed Virgin to graciously vocate to him the verse from impending danger. The Indians, perceiving this strange conduct to be the result of fear, felt disposed to have a little fun at his expense. So, mounting him upon a horse, they bound his hands and feet and guarded him to a post of the American fort. Yep. 75, 76. The fort gates being closed against them, they demanded admittance on the plea of the wishing to trade. What would you buy? Asked the commandant. Tobacco. What have you brought us to pay it with? A white man. A white man? Exclaimed the former. At what price? Oh, he is not worth much. A plug of tobacco in his full value, continued the warriors. The commandant now began understanding the joke, and on recognizing the prisoner as an employee of the other fort, he told them they might possibly find a market for him at the next post, but for his own part he was not disposed to purchase. The Indians then paraded around the fort, and after saluting his inmates with 3 defending whoops, proceeded at full charge toward Fort Platte. When arrived, having prostrated 2 scaffolds of dead Sioux by the way, they informed the person in charge that they had brought back one of his men and claimed from him a plug of tobacco for their troubles. The circumstance attending to this request were so comical a nature that the commandant felt disposed to humor the joke and gave the tobacco, upon which they immediately left in pursuit of their enemies. Having remained prisoners into the hospitality of the Indians for 2 days and a half, we were lengthily permitted again to resume our journey. Following the creek down towards for 2 days, we succeeded, and then bearing to the left, after a ride of some 12 miles, we struck the Laramie River at a point which presented broad bottoms upon each side, with an abundance of timber. Here we remained encamped till the subsequent day. In journeying thus far, we passed over a sufficient extent of the broad expanse to give general description of it, from personal observation coupled with the information derived from others more experienced. The plains of Laramie are bounded upon the north and the east by the Black Hills, south by a ridge of unmaked elevations composed of soft, areous rock and terra limestone, embedded in marl and white clay, sterile and almost entirely desolate of vegetation. and the west by the Medicine Bow Mountains. This section includes an area 160 miles long by 70 broad. The northern portion of the high plateau almost dissolute of springs or streams of water having a mixed soil of clay and sand, producing the grass and other particularities incident to the grand prairies. Westernly, it was composed of red sand and gravel, tolerably fertile and abundant in rocky fragments. The southern portion of the watered by the number of streams that rise into the Medicine Bow Mountains and flow eastward, some of them pouring their waters into the Laramie River, and others losing themselves in the sand. Towards the southern extremity of this base, let's go with another picture. Some of them, okay. Towards the southwestern extremity of the base of a lofty, isolated mountain is a salt lake of considerable dimensions. Several other lakes are also found adjacent to the Medicine Bow Mountains, whose waters are strongly impregnated with mineral salts. In numerous places, the surface for small distances is entirely naked and whitened by the saltine effervescences that vied in the appearance with the unspotted purity of fresh fallen snow. Oh, the Laramie River traces its way through the whole extent, rising in the southern extremity of the Medicine Bow Mountains and in desolate highlands that form the dividing ridges between its own and the waters of the Cache of the Lake Padre, and after flowing a distance of some 300 miles, discharges itself into the Platte. Upon the river and its branches are many beautiful bottoms of rich alluvial soil, well adapted to cultivation, varying from 5 to 10 miles in length and from 2 to 5 in breadth. These bottoms are some of the extent well supplied with timber consisting of ash, elm, cottonwood, box elder, and willow, while the adjacent mountains and hills afford pine, cedar, and balsam. Of the various kinds of wild fruits and berries are found cherries, plums, currants, gooseberries, service berries, buffalo berries, and some few grapes. Among its vegetables and roots, also the breadroot, the plume barkians, and the commode. Commode? Yeah. Its prevailing rock is sandstone, gray, malicious, brown, algorious, red granite, and ferruginous limestone. Red granite with various conglomerates and heavy boulders of fragmentary and transitional rock. Among the mineral productions incident to this region are salt and sulfur, soda and magnesia, nitrate, alum, coal, iron, copper, and gold, the latter only in small quantities. Among its game is embraced nearly every variety found in the country adjacent to the mountains. The high prairies skirting the tributaries of the Laramie, though favored with many valleys and fertile soil, are fit only for grazing purposes on account of their general aridity and scarcity of water, a fault by the way too common with the large proportions of the vast extent of the territory from the neighborhood of our western frontiers, most of the very shores of the Pacific. And there we go. We made a whole chapter. Okay. Well, what did you learn from all of that? Well, I learned something. I learned that he talks a lot about the soil, the mountains, the rocks. That trip must be pretty darn boring and with no adventure. Can you imagine sitting on your horse plotting along? Well, we went 12 miles. Okay, we went 15 miles. We went 20 miles. We went 50 miles today. Wow. Just through the prairie. The only thing I can really write about is the rocks and the soil and the animals we saw, because there's really nothing out there. And by the time we get to the mountains, it takes days. And when the Indians come, I'm surprised you didn't write more about them, because that was probably the highlight. Anyway, glad you could all join me. Thank you for coming. Hope you enjoyed listening. Leave me a comment. If you like this, give me a thumbs up. Thank you. Trying to expand the channel. You know how it goes. So thank you for being here, and we'll see you soon. Remember, go out and have your own adventure.